Welcome back. All theories remain on the table as far as the WHO is concerned when it comes to tracing the source of COVID-19. That is according to the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. He made the comments after the international team published their report on Tuesday about their Wuhan field trip earlier this year. Dr. Tedros added that he did not believe this assessment was extensive enough and that further data and studies will be needed to reach more robust conclusions. Has the report revealed anything we did not already know? And what is next? Joining me today from Washington, D.C. is Eric Ding, Senior Fellow at the Federation of American Scientists. Eric, welcome back. My first question to you, did this report tell you and our audience globally anything that we did not already know?
Well, I think this report summarized a lot of the evidence better. And I think it uncovered some of the other data about maybe there's more to it than, of course, just the seafood market. But beyond just that, we don't have the definitive smoking gun evidence in any particular direction. They basically say it's, wildlife is likely, but it doesn't necessarily give the exact juicy data that we're all kind of looking for, aha, this is likely what happened. And so that's why it's been very unsatisfying to many sides. And, obviously, depending on your bias, you draw different conclusions based on such a report. And that's why many people are drawn still to the lab leaks.
Yeah, you're looking at the footage of the international team, mostly led by WHO, conducting a field trip to Wuhan. That is really what we're talking about today. They filed the report, and the report says it is inconclusive to say whether, COVID-19 originated from a lab, although that is extremely unlikely. But guess what? Dr. Tedros, the Director General of WHO, said all hypotheses remain on the table and that we must continue to follow the science and leave no stone unturned as we do. Dr. Tedros, the head of WHO, specifically said, and I quote, "Although the team has concluded that a lab leak is the least likely hypothesis, this requires further investigation, potentially with additional missions involving specialist experts, which I'm ready to deploy." Dr. Chen in Shanghai, what does this statement from the WHO chief tell you?
Well, I think actually Dr. Tedros has been under enormous pressure, since the outbreak of the pandemic. The United States have been accusing him of, collaborating with China. Some kind of conspiracy theory have been played out. So that actually, I think actually there are a lot of political forces, influences that has been, working upon. I'm sure actually, between, during the time when, the WHO team was in Wuhan, that some certain countries and some particular forces have been working at, as long as they can put those words into Dr. Tedros' mouth, that will really, really save them from, losing their faith in the face of that, that conclusive reports. So the reports is there, and also, WHO team had concluded their visit to Wuhan. But actually, at this time, if actually Dr. Tedros could actually say something like that, actually to insinuate some kind of a possibility of some other possibilities, then obviously that will really be in favor of those anti-China forces, because mind you, actually, the purpose of those forces, in particular, the United States and also some other Western anti-China forces, what they want to achieve is actually to disparage China, to play the blame game, to shift the blame upon China about the coronavirus. So I think actually that is actually the outcome or the results of those anti-China forces to try to influence Dr. Tedros.
Right. Let me go to our colleague in Washington, Eric. Good to have you back here. The chief of WHO said basically the lab leak theory is the least likely one, according to their recent finding after a field trip to Wuhan. but yet still he is ready to deploy additional missions involving specialist experts to explore that possibility. What does this tell you?
I think it tells me that WHO is actually trying to find evidence in one direction or another, because the evidence for one side wasn't definitive, and the evidence for the other side, there wasn't enough data to draw from. And it's one thing to say, the evidence says no, and the other side, the evidence, there isn't any. It's not, they're not trying to actually find actual fault, because WHO doesn't care about the actual blame game politically. They just want to actually know the source to prevent future pandemics. And if there was a pandemic that started in another country, I wager that China would want to know how the heck did that pandemic emerge as well. Because these are the questions. We can't just be drawing answers from nothing. So we need more data. And I think the more data part is critical. And I'm not for one side or the other. But as a scientist, I want to know for sure, not just, it's inconclusive, oh, everything's inconclusive. That is not satisfying.
Yeah, another point of contention, focus, of course, is data. We've heard from a White House spokesperson accusing China of not fully sharing the data, a narrative that is repeated, of course, by many other countries. Dr. Tedros, the head of WHO, also said that he does not believe that this assessment, the assessment filed by the WHO was extensive enough, saying that I expect future collaborative studies to include more timely and comprehensive data sharing. But China said some patients' records could not be shared because of data protection and privacy, which is commonplace around the world if you go to any hospital. Eric, is it fair to regard privacy protection as being untransparent on data sharing?
Well, I think if they are patients at the very center of potentially where the virus emerged, I think national security and global health security warrants that the data is shared. It's just like, it's one thing if you're a private citizen somewhere far, far away, but Wuhan was the epicenter. Nobody denies that. And the early cases and suspected cases and possible cases needs to be fully unraveled. And, China stands by privacy when it's convenient, but sometimes when it's not convenient, the privacy things goes out the window. I think right now the world cares. We're in the middle of a deadly pandemic. The world needs to know. And I think it's up to the Chinese government to share and be as cooperative. And I think the world leaders should, and other countries should hold back from judgment until we see the data. So I'm more in the middle. Let's see all the data. I think that's what all scientists just want.
Dr. Chen, the chief of WHO, said he's expecting more data that is shared in a more timely and comprehensive manner. But China says, some patients' record could not be shared because of data protection, because of privacy. How do you look at, these different arguments?
Well, definitely, China, every country has its laws and regulations with regard to the privacy of the patients and also relevant personnel. That definitely needs to be respected. On the other hand, I think actually there's no perfect data, especially at the end of the 2019 when the epidemic started to have its outbreak in part of China, in particular in Hubei, in Wuhan. People at the time were not aware of the severity of this attack, this outbreak. So definitely at the time about the preservation of the data, about whether some medical records have been kept in a very serious way. I'm sure now any such a disease will be tackled in a very serious, ultra serious manner. But at the time, of course, people might just be treating those diseases like a flu, common flu. So at the time, I'm sure some kind of in the process of preservation and also dealing with the records, there might be some kind of loopholes, at the time when, maybe, in some hospitals, some records might not be, kept. So I think actually at this time, when the disease, the pandemic is so severe, so seriously becoming the focus of attention globally, as if, those countries are actually demanding a kind of like complete records of everything. I think that is really a kind of like a far-fetched, expectation or even demand about that. So I think actually at the time we need to be, respecting, science, respecting, facts. I don't think actually China would be deliberately blocking access to any data because the purpose of any investigation is to find out the any possibility of the origin of the virus. So that actually is what China has been collaborating with the WHO and also the international medical community to work.
Yeah, Professor Chen, let me stay with you. We know the US and the UK criticized the WHO report over the same issue in a statement. Later on, that statement was actually signed by 12 other countries, including Australia, Canada, and Japan. What kind of political pressure, is the WHO under? Yeah,
I think actually this public health crisis has from the very beginning been seriously politicized. I'm sure actually the United States and some other Western anti-China forces are very much disappointed at the outcome of the report. Before actually the formal release of the report, I'm sure actually they already know about the contents. So to their disappointment, they already have been so much in expectation of something that could be to the disadvantage of China. But definitely the outcome of the report is to their disappointment. So I think that is why actually almost like instantly, without even reading the report carefully, they will be releasing that statement accusing China of various, incriminations. That is actually a kind of like a political ploy that they have been, playing. I think this is exactly, what is hindering the ultimate, revelation of the truth, because such political forces have been politicizing and even weaponizing their investigation, and that actually is going to have disastrous outcomes.
Right. Eric, let me go back to you. The report of the WHO is officially called WHO Convened Global Study of Origins of SARS-CoV-2 China Part. In your opinion, with your expertise on pandemics and your research experiences, how might such studies outside of China, help prevent future pandemics from happening? How important is it for other virus origin tracing missions to be conducted beyond China?
Yeah, I think these kind of investigations need to be done worldwide in the future in much more faster and meticulous detail. And we need faster genome sequencing. We need much more than just hospital case records. We need wastewater surveillance. And I think the wastewater data also coming from Europe in fall of 2019 was also interesting. But I think that wastewater and all these other surveillance, blood donation pool surveillances, I think these are all really key for monitoring viruses so that we can actually look back in time and look where did a virus emerge. And we're looking at that as well in addition to the China report. Look, we need to find these because the origin really matters. The origin really determines, was this something that could have been prevented? Was this something that naturally happened because of animal density and human agricultural density? All these things really, really matter because it's not a matter of another 100 years before we see one of this. I expect we probably see another one of these pandemics in a decade or even less than that. So this is why time is of the urgency, and getting the reason why really, really matters.
Eric, many media outlets, including the New York Times, The Guardian, and Reuters, all of them quoted a biosecurity expert from Australia who still believes that the report offers no strong evidence and a lab accident is certainly a possibility. How serious is, first of all, what do you make of the fact that this expert was quoted by 3 mainstream Western media, and how serious should we take this expert?
Well, I think experts who make strong statements are quoted very widely. Sometimes in the past, when I've made strong statements about something, it's been quoted widely too because it's an interesting comment. But in this sense, I think one expert's opinion, that is not necessarily that conclusive. It's a hot button topic, and they want hot button quotes. So I wouldn't say that the expert's opinion is definitive per se. I think what is definitive is the data, and I think that should be really, really transparent because this is no longer a domestic China issue. And I think quoting one sensational quote, I don't think it changes the actual narrative. Some say, are they biased? But at the end of the day, all the serious scientists out there, they don't have one decision or bias in one way or another. They just want to see the data so that they can judge for themselves. Some political forces are out there, but at the same time, the scientific community, it's truly not satisfied. To many scientists, I say, they don't have a satisfying answer. And until we have a satisfying good answer, I think these speculation are out there. And so it's incumbent on China to really, really work with WHO to provide this data so that no scientists are still scratching their heads a decade from now.
Exactly. We're running out of time, but finally, Professor Chen, BBC reporter John Studworth, who had been based in China for 9 years, left Chinese mainland to Taiwan, saying his team had dealt with, in months, with personal attacks over reporting of alleged abuses of minorities in Xinjiang. The BBC said he exposed the truth the Chinese authorities did not want to know. But China said this reporter left without informing the Chinese authorities, which is not a usual procedure, and that his press card was due to expire. I mean, your thoughts on this incident?
Yeah, I think this is a very dramatic stunt that he has been playing. He's trying to create a kind of like a victim narrative, as if to create this impression that the Chinese authorities are actually, persecuting him. But definitely that's not the case. He chose to leave China, to flee China, as if he was actually being, chased after by Chinese authorities. But that's definitely not the case. So I think actually he has been playing that kind of ploy repeatedly, trying to disparage China, trying to create a kind of like authoritarian, persecuting image of China. But that is definitely what he has been playing at, to demonize and also to stigmatize China.
Gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both so very much, and thank you guys for watching The Point. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing.